is it really worth it to spend $25 million on, one guy in your movie?
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, I love prestige movies, and there's a place for them for sure. But again, thinking about your idea now has to sell in a sense. Hello all, welcome to a Monday edition of the Kinolime podcast. I'm John Schramm here in studio with Danny Murray, to my right, your left. What's up, D?
Man, this is a long weekend.
No Dodger talk. I don't want to hear it.
I'm thrilled. I'm having the best time I've had since last year.
Dude, talk about best time. Your hair volume right now is incredible.
I know. I do this and then it explodes.
I love it.
And it's like the least amount of volume in my family. Everyone else has like a microphone head, I like to call it.
Yeah, because that's your quaff is
quaffing,
vibing today. It's quaffing. I wanted to talk about, I sent this in our Kinolime global group chat, maybe, 2 weeks ago. I read an article from The Hollywood Reporter titled "How Movies Are Increasingly Driving Streaming Revenue." And I'm not really a numbers guy, but I found it fascinating that the article surmises that streamers are increasingly relying on films for their revenue, which I just stated in the title. But it was kind of like an aha moment for me, like, wait a second, like, I thought, as one would, TV is the main source of revenue for these big streaming giants, but actually no, films are, because people go back and rewatch their favorite films over and over again, as opposed to watching a hit series that maybe you watch once and kind of never revisit again. And it just goes into some other nerdy details about the length of series versus a film. And then I looked up another article from Media Post, which I don't know if it's from this or wherever, but somewhere I came across that one executive says a strong movie delivers returns faster than any miniseries. And it got me thinking, like, dude, this is great news for movies. I don't know. Did you read the articles? What'd you think?
Yeah, I did. It kind of touches on something that's been blowing my mind since maybe like peak TV, like 10 years ago.
Sure.
Which is just like, you would hear that Game of Thrones is spending $25 million an episode. I'm like, like that feels like we could be using that money to make so many more movies. And of course, for something like Game of Thrones or like, your Breaking Bads, it makes more sense.
You'll go back and rewatch that like every 5 years, but
then they're spending that same amount of money on like a random mini series that no one cares about.
That's the key right there, folks.
Yeah.
Is that, yes, you only get The Sopranos, The Wire, Game of Thrones, I just named 3 HBO shows, plus Breaking Bad. Like, those only come every so often, which you will rewatch every 5 years, but that's a huge time commitment as well, right? Whereas, like, a good film, like, every year, Home Alone is going to rank in buku bucks during holiday season, and I don't care. I've seen it 1,000 times. I'm going to watch it again. So, I thought that was really interesting, and I wanted to come up with some tips for y'all writers out there regarding this. Now, look, I want to be very honest with you. I hate going with the flow of the market. I think you should write what you love. I don't damn the stats and the data, but it is interesting to see, because if you're thinking about, okay, so that's the purist in me. Then there's like the realist part of me that's like, hey, dude, if you want to sell your screenplay, if you want to get out there, if you want to be a working writer, you kind of have to know the market a bit. Yeah. Right? And they talk about studios are increasingly spending on 90 to 105 minute films as opposed to longer films. They're doing more high concept than star driven vehicles. So I curated a list of 6 screenwriting tips that we can come deliver to you. And then Daniel, we're just going to riff a bit. So awesome. Tip number 1, open fast or get skipped. Now, according to Bloomberg, Netflix sees massive drop-offs after that 5-minute mark, right? So if the story hasn't kicked that algorithm in for them, they're abandoning all hope. So it makes me think about like, hey, you got to treat your screenplay like you got 5 minutes of someone's attention. Will you hook them in those 5 minutes? I don't know, D, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's something that, on a show I was working on maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, we received that same kind of note that a lot of these streamers, if they are not completely engrossed within sometimes the first page, it is not, they'll either ask you to rewrite it or it's not something they will consider.
Yeah.
It's just how their algorithms work. Like, you do not have the time to kind of slow burn in like a 20-minute kind of intro to the film.
Now,
you need to start quick.
Every fiber of my being hates this because I believe like it should be like a fine wine, like it should open up. But again, this is if you're trying to break it, if you're really trying to get noticed, trying to get that agent, that manager, sell something, you kind of have to know the rules to break the rules. So if they're looking at that 5-minute algorithm mark, hook them by page 2.
Yeah.
Pacing is no longer a craft; it's now a business metric, which again burns me to my soul. But it's just something to be aware of when going into your pass.
Yeah, it's just last kind of quick note on that, right? Because if you read any like the intro screenplay books, it's like your inciting incident needs to be on page 10. And then, at some point, maybe a decade ago, it's like you should push that up a little quicker.
Yeah.
Now, like really, if you are trying, if you have the ability to have a, your big popping scene on page 1 or 2, do it.
Yeah. So this is an interesting tip that I thought of, is that based on the research, high concept is beating out high cast. Now, one battle after another, we'll talk about how it may lose money, which is a sin because that movie's incredible.
This year it will, yeah.
This year will. But specifically for streamers, they're seeing that high concept with no name cast tend to outperform prestige films with a giant cast. So when you're writing your film, think of it you don't no longer need the big cast names to get your script greenlit. Like, it's all about the concept. Like rom-coms, thrillers, horror, those are always doing well on streaming. Again, not saying you have to write that, but just be aware that that's kind of where the market's going.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because something like One Battle After Another is an incredible film, but, when you look at a lot of these movies and you're like, how is it possible that this movie was this much money? It's generally because the producers are taking massive fees. And a guy like, say, DiCaprio on One Battle After Another,
he gets first dollar gross.
First gross.
First dollar gross. That's insane. I know, but good for him.
Yeah, so then
make your money.
Yeah, that can very easily like double or balloon your budget into like 9-figure mania.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess like in a time when the film industry is contracting, media is contracting, inflation's up, like, you do kind of have to wonder, like, is it really worth it to spend $25 million on, one guy in your movie?
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, I love prestige movies, and there's a place for them for sure. But again, thinking about your idea now has to sell in a sentence, which it always kind of has been. But having those larger drama films that, maybe don't unfurl nicely, like, but you kind of got to get to the point. The high concept, as of now, tends to be what they're looking for. So just be aware that that's what the streamers are looking for. Tip 3, but this has always been a favorite of mine, and I debate with Fred LeBeau on this, is like, keep your screenplay tight, 90 to 110 pages, 105, they say. Now, Fred, who we had on here a bit ago, will say, like, damn the rules, 120 pages is enough time. And I tend to agree. Like, the great screenplays that I've read in the past, you are gripped at 120, but these are like masters at their craft that know how to maximize and be efficient with the 120. What we find, at least I'll speak for myself, is if I'm getting a 120-page screenplay, there's 15 pages of fat you can cut.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's not a bad thing to keep it shorter because it's about retention. They're seeing that in that 105-minute mark, that's the sweet spot for streaming films. D. Yeah,
I mean, kind of on the same note I brought up in your first tip, but a lot of these buyers will tell you blatantly, like, if, depending on what the type of film is, like, there was a documentary I worked on like a couple years ago, and they pretty much said, like, it's going to be really hard for us to even really consider something over the 80-minute mark.
Yep.
Like, that type of film has to be an hour and 20 minutes, or people will watch something else.
I know.
It's that same thing with movies, unless you're talking about prestige directors, massive, kind of like awards-driven campaigns, which, every year, there's 100 films with real financial backing trying to get there. 5 to 10 of them will get that acclaim. Like, you need to, especially if you're like an aspiring writer, try to work in that box if you can.
To start, again, go make your great couple hits, then do your prestige film. Somewhere I found Netflix and Prime report up to 40% higher completion for movies under that 105-minute mark. So again, if you're thinking about selling to a streamer or want to get it on there, think about that zone of where to hit, because it's just time too, man. Like, we find the time because it's a huge passion, but people go to TV because they can do something in 30 minutes. But what's odd and I wouldn't say hypocritical, but interesting is that they'll end up binging 4 episodes, which are a total of 2 hours when they could have watched a film. But
and it kind of goes too where like if you're an aspiring writer, you're not repped, you're looking to make something, every minute is money, right?
Yeah.
That you are shedding. Like if you can make a tight like hour 20, hour 30-minute film,
sure,
it becomes potentially more makeable as well for you to kind of have like a proof of concept, wheel out and
agreed.
Try to make that 2-hour movie. Mm-hmm.
So tip 4, end with a bang. So streamers see rewatchability and shareability as more valuable than awards prestige. They want that twist ending that people talk about. They want to have that wallop at the end that hits you so people can go to, oh my God, did you see this? And Spielberg said this a while ago, that your 2 most important parts of your screenplay, the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes, right? Because that's what you're remembering sitting out in the theater and being gripped, and then your last 10 minutes, that's what you're leaving with. So it's kind of the same thing, but you really want to end with that bang. Again, based on the market research and what we're gathering from here. I don't know if there's anything else to add to that, but it seems pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, I mean, I was just trying to think of, it's a shame that a lot of the kind of like awards films like have not kind of played outside of festivals yet. I'm excited to kind of see, from like the kind of best picture noms that we could assume are going to make it, like Secret Agent, it was an accident.
Sure.
I've heard a lot about some of them kind of ending on these big kind of like needle drop moments.
Yeah, it's interesting because you shouldn't. Again, if it works for your film, that you need to have that fade out and like nebulous ending, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a twist. It could just mean catharsis. Like give the audience some relief, some gratification, some peak to that, roller coaster, as opposed to just like fading out into nothingness and dwelling on. Again, there are a few masters that can do that well, and I love those movies, but for the majority of us mortals, I think twist, catharsis, payoff, proper ending. 5th one, this is interesting because Hitchcock would think in terms of visuals, obviously as a director, but your 5th tip here is your thumbnail or think of a storyboard, whatever, is really telling your story. So they claim that, a Netflix exec said that they pass on pitches that don't work as a thumbnail. That's the new litmus test. So what that could mean is they want to see everything visually compelling, right? Nothing boring to the eye. Like if you were to pause your movie, does it look like a painting or does it look interesting to look at? And again, I find that interesting because we are telling stories through images. So you want your images to sear into the mind of your reader. And if it's just boring and, blasé, that could be interesting. And when I write, I tend to sometimes, if I'm stuck, think visually, like how can I convey this through just image? I find that kind of an interesting writing technique. I don't know what your thoughts are. Yeah,
I think, I was telling this to someone yesterday, but having an amazing story is obviously the most critical aspect of trying to get a movie made. It's like an inspiring writer, of course, but having like a really great deck that can communicate to producers and to, again, like in the entire industry, like there is maybe 1 or 2 people in the totem pole that will actually read your story and tell everyone else if it's worthwhile. After that, it is primarily a sales job up the ladder, right? Have a great deck. A film that kind of, I went to a Q&A with the star of the film, Indy the dog, and his owners who produced and directed it. But this film, Good Boy, that is, I think, out in theaters right now. It got picked up. It's a really good concept. It's a horror movie through the lens of a dog. And it was going to get like a pretty small release. And then they released a new poster that was it went viral, and it was just like of these monsters, and it communicated the story perfectly. Yes. It went viral. And then I forget who distributed it. It may have been Neon, gave it wide release after the poster went viral. And that's something to think about when writing, is that I tend to think every 10 pages, a twist, something new, something interesting. How do you like shift the audience a little bit, jolt them the reader to dive in? Think of that from a visual standpoint. Every 10, 15 pages, is there a movie poster hidden in there somewhere? Is there something where you could pause, right? Or create something that would convey an image better to your audience? Again,
I hate that we have to sell it this way. I really, really do. It should just be about the words. But again, who are the people buying and putting money into your pocket to make your movie? You kind of have to play a little bit ball of what they're going for. So that I really like.
Especially if, again, like that movie is a good example because these were not, big name filmmakers. Like these were people that shot a movie in their house with their dog. So like, again, if you are not coming in with like, reps and people in the industry, like you need to be able to sell the film as well as you need to be able to, write a great story. It is pretty much equally important.
And the last tip, which has kind of been around for a while, is think globally, right? I mean, look at Netflix, like K-dramas, everything. People want films that can be translated, not just by speech or dialogue, but visually, that's not even the right word, not visually, can just play in other markets, right? Will a Brazilian teenager get your movie? Now, again, if it's centric to your story to have it take place in America or in your setting, of course, go for that. Like, you got to write what you know. But again, they're just always looking for those movies that can play across the pond and elsewhere in the world. And it's just something that you can't ignore. You got to think of, like, how is Netflix going to sell your movie to 100 countries? Again, if it works and you can do it, great, because that'll only going to help you increase your ability to sell the film or get someone to say yes, because they can then sell it to other markets. I don't know what you think. Would your English aunt get your film that you're writing, Danny?
Well, yeah, I think like another good way to kind of look at this is you could, oddly enough, like there's a lot of buyers that like share this data on like a lot of the filmmaker subreddits, oddly enough, and then you could kind of dig to try to find them. But there's a lot of month-to-month analyses of like what different buyers in different territories are buying, right? Like length, genre, type of films. It's probably worth looking into that. Like if you're kind of still in like the concept phase, to try to get an idea of like,
that steers you. That's nice.
Yeah, where can I steer my story to like make it competitive potentially in like a buyer's market.
And when we say globally, it doesn't mean that you have to placate to everyone in the world. It just means like talk about universal themes like love, revenge, what did I write down? Grief, survival. Those are things that play across anywhere. Any human alive will understand those themes. That's what I mean. It's just if your story has to be specific to, let's say, New York City and this one borough, like I get it. But if you're telling a more universal story, like I just mentioned some of those themes, like that just helps play across other markets. But again, not to be glib, like this is good. Like it's good to know what's going on. It doesn't mean that you have to sell your soul. Like go write what you want, but like know the data, know the rules so you can break the rules. Like know what sandbox you're playing in. Because again, if your goal is to be a working filmmaker, working writer, where you're getting paid to do this for a living, like, yeah, you kind of have to know, like, who are the people paying my paycheck? What are they looking for? And I just think it's good to know. So we wanted to share them with you today. So thank you for letting us ramble for 6 tips. Yeah. And hopefully you found them interesting. I thought it was interesting putting them together.
Yeah. And like, I guess like my last kind of thought with this is like, this really also like these things shouldn't really box you in, because at the end of the day, like most great films have like a really simple dramatic argument.
Yeah.
And if you write it very well and if you have characters you believe in and a strong story, like most of the kind of sales and packaging and how can we communicate this to, different markets, that usually kind of solves itself if you have a really strong story.
See, we're ending with a bang. That was a great third act climax to our talk. Danny, thank you so much. For everyone here at Kinolime, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you soon. Keep writing.